This is a very, unfortunately, a very sad portion of the Torah, but a very encouraging one as well, I will submit. The premises of what we're going to be talking today about is, of course, Bilam. Why? Because the focus of this Torah portion really is all about the counsel of Bilam. There is a king named Balak who hires Bilam to curse Yisra'ٰ�l. If I had to do a quick synopsis of the whole parasha, that's what it's all about. We're going to hire this great prophet to curse these people called Israel. That's why Bilam is known as the prophet of the nations, to be exact, to be honest with you. And we're going to see how really the counsel of Bilam was so amazingly, strategic, like you wouldn't believe. So in two ways, we're going to see something very amazing today. It's an encouraging word for every single one of you, but at the same time, it's a warning word for every single one of you. And we're going to see really how that kind of plays out. So Balak is really concerned, who is the king at this point, very concerned about really a minority people at this point. And with that said, he hires Balaam to curse the people. Now, the question that we must ask, why did he hire Balaam? Like, who is Balaam that we should hire him to curse the people of Israel? It's a good question. Have you ever asked that question? Why would he hire Balaam? What was the purpose of hiring Balaam? And first of all, what was the belief of who Balaam was? It proposes another question. What makes you believe that you can actually curse an entire nation? Like, what kind of authority and power do they believe Balaam possessed that he had the ability to even conceive, to even make this happen? Well, obviously, there must have been something there. There must have been a thought. There must have been a belief. Balaam, I will submit to you, was very, very popular in the whole Mesopotamia area. Have to be, because for the king to go, it's like the president of the United States saying, we're going to hire this prophet to help us with our enemies. Well, they're not just going to he's not just going to like name a name. Obviously, whoever he's going to hire is someone that is well known, someone that is very popular, essentially. Balaam was just that prophet for the nations. Notice that reality, he is a prophet for the nations, meaning that Israel is not the exclusive nation to carry out prophets. All nations carry prophets as well. So when we're talking about the word prophet, automatically we shouldn't think, well, it's a good thing. But typically, we do discriminate in that sense. When we think the word prophet, we think, well, he's got to be good because he's a prophet or she's a prophetess, whatever case may be. In this case, we've seen that even the nations carry their own prophets. All religions carry their own prophets, I will submit to you. It's not about the word prophet, it's about what the prophet carries and what message the prophet carries in essence. So, the name for this parasha is Balak. Interesting, it's not Balaam, but the whole story is about Balaam. But the parasha really is Balak, which is the king in this case. And what does Balak mean in Hebrew? It means to destroy in one sense, like a destroyer, in an essence, to devastate something, to get rid of something in an essence. It's no coincidence that this king, his name carries the connotation of devastation. It carries the connotation of destroying. What is it that the king wants to destroy? A small people called Yisra'ٰ�l. There's two ways to destroy a person. May I submit this to you today? Because what we see in here is that the tactic of Balak was not to hire an army to kill Israel. I don't know if you picked up on that. How is it that one man can destroy an entire nation? Logistically, that makes no sense in any language, for that matter. So if I wanted to destroy a nation, what am I going to do? I'm going to hire an army to destroy a nation. And the bigger my army is, logistically speaking, the chances of me winning are probably greater. Right? But notice the tone in the Torah here. It's teaching us something very, very unique, folks. Please pay attention to this. See, Balak knew that if he were to hire an army, he can destroy probably a good portion of all the nation, but he cannot destroy the nation in itself. Really, because what carries the authority of the nation is their faith. So, this is, again, another way to destroy a person is if you destroy their faith. If you remove the identity of a person and their faith and what they believe, in essence, you have a good chance of winning over that soul and destroying it, either destroying or elevating it in this case. So Balak really had a very strategic plan. Now I want to share something with you because this is very, very interesting. Remember what I started, I said there's two ways to destroy a people. There is the traditional way, I'm coming with you with M16s and suicide bombs and C4s and I'm just going to bomb you. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is I'm going to remove your identity. Yisra'ٰēl has suffered from this for thousands of years. Not just in a physical sense, meaning bombs, C4s, but there's the other way of destroying it they have to deal with, and that is by many, many people trying to remove who they are. If there's ever a story that really echoes that so profound, it is the story here of Balak. In his whole purpose to destroying the nation, he saw it differently. He thought, you know what, if we bomb him and we kill him, really it's not going to do anything. We just need to remove them all completely in their identity. So you remove the identity, and by the way, the Romans conquered this way as well. Even though the Romans were very brutal in one ways, but one of the ways that they actually did a lot of their victory was they stripped, and we see this all through generation. As Israel has gone through every exile, what is the purpose of the people that they're subjugated to? It's to remove their identity. It's the whole point. That's what Egypt tried to do. That's what Babylon tried to do. Assyria tried to do it. Later the Romans, the Greeks, you name it. It's always been the plan. Why? Where did they get this plan from? Essentially, it's right here. And it's really, really mastermind. So Balak, let's get back to point in here. Balak is the king who wants to destroy a people, but he's going to do it in a very unconventional way. He's going to devastate, he's going to destroy them by removing their identity. The gematria value for Balak gives us a total of 132. This is very, very important because 132 literally gives us the Hebrew word for vayichaslalu, which literally means, it's from the word chesel in Hebrew as well, which can mean also foolishness. So here's the caveat. We're going to destroy you not with C4s, not with M16s, but rather we're going to destroy you with foolishness. That is one way to destroy a person, with 100% foolishness. Now, you're probably thinking, what are you talking about today, right? We're going to see that in just a minute here, what exactly I'm aiming at. So the focus today, of course, is going to be Balaam, because he is the prophet of hire, right? Who was Balaam? Well, in order to really identify who was Balaam, right? What does Balaam means anyways? You know, these are intricate things in the Hebrew Bible that every word has a meaning. And through the word and the meaning gives us a little bit more of the puzzle where the story is going. Balaam, as it turns out, literally means not for the people. You know, so he is a prophet that's actually not for the people, essentially. Can there ever be such a thing? Absolutely. Many prophets out there that are not for the people, believe it or not. His gematria value for Balaam, because we already talked about Balak. Balak wants to destroy, right? So he hires, Balak wants to destroy. He hires Balaam. Balaam is not for the people. This is the source that he's going to, which gives us the gematria of 142, which 142 gives us the word in English for wickedness. He's hiring a prophet that is not for the people, who is going to infuse the people essentially with wickedness. Now, question is, how can you accomplish such thing? Like if you've seen wickedness coming, won't you run? Right? I mean, you're saying, theoretically speaking, that makes no sense. Like how am I going to accomplish this, right? Well, this is where it gets very interesting because you see, the character of Balaam, even though he is not for the people, and we know that he's a false prophet, right, at this point. He was hired by Balak, the king. His mission was to curse Yisra'eel. But here's something that a lot of people may not know about Balaam. Balaam was an Edomite, which means he came from Edom, which Edom is who? Esau. Esau is what became later Rome. I'm going with this somewhere with this. Some of you are looking at me already and have a smile because you know where this is heading. I'm not really tampering with the text. I'm just letting you know exactly where we're going with this. He is a prophet that represents Rome, a prophet that represents Edom, essentially. As a matter of fact, the Journal of American Oriental Society, in volume 35, states that Balaam actually was not just an Edomite, but he was an Edomite sage, to be specific. Now, what's the difference? It's a huge difference, because he was not just the common folk, he was the one who actually taught. Now, just for clarification purposes, we're not teaching to hate Romans here. This is not the intent and purpose of the teaching. There's a lot of good Romans people. There's a lot of good people that are Romans. You know what I mean? This is not about, I don't want this to turn into a class act of genealogies. This is not the purpose of the teaching. But rather that we can see exactly where the trend actually originated from and how we can see some of this repetition happening through our history and Jewish history specifically. So it says that he was the son of Beor. It turns out the Lexicon Bible Dictionary says that Beor was the father of Bela, the father of a king of Edom, essentially. Now, it's interesting that Bela actually appears in the Jewish Bible, in the Tanakh. The first time we read about Bela, to be exactly, you'll be surprised. It's all the way in Sefer Bereshit, in the book of Genesis. And I'll take you there real quickly. This is going to blow your mind. In Genesis 36, verses 31 through 32, it states, "Now these are the kings who reigned in the land of Edom before any king reigned over the sons of Israel," it states. Then it says, "Bela, the son of Beor, reigned in Edom, and the name of the city was Dinhabah." So we see that, and this is when Abraham was fighting all the four kings. So this is very, very very interesting where this all kind of originates from. So, and it's important to note up to this point is that Balaam was an Edomite sage. Balak is a Midianite, by the way. And why do I mention this is because Edom and the Midianites completely did not get along. It's interesting how enemies usually will come together even though they hate each other, for a common enemy. Right? It's just classical. We see this all, not just in the Bible, we see this even in modern history today. Nations that come together, they can't even stand each other. But we do have one common enemy we can't stand. So let's join together and destroy him. Now, where Balaam gets this credibility is what I want to target in today. Why is it that they believe so much in Balaam? Well, because, as it turns out, Midian was of Abraham's loin. If you guys remember correctly in the book of Bereshit, the Midianites come from Abraham's loin. Moab was from who? Lot, which still ties into Abraham. So they all tie back to the lineage of Abraham, essentially. So, if you were standing there that day, you will look at Balaam not as some crazy lunatic prophet, but rather a prophet who came from the lineage of Abraham, who happens to do a lot of miracles, by the way, because Balaam was known in the area of Mesopotamia for curing people, doing all kinds of miracles and all this kind of stuff, doing predictions that came true, by the way. So when you put that all into account, I want to picture something for you so you can see it. Not only does he have the credentials, lineagely speaking, but he also performs the right miracles that come true on top of that. And, back then there was no Facebook, but for some reason the news traveled faster than Facebook today, right? So this is going headline news all through the Middle East. There is a prophet now in the Middle East. His name is Balaam. He's the greatest thing since sliced bread, even though it didn't exist back then, right? But you get my point? And so now everybody's looking for Balaam. Everybody wants Balaam because he's the one who is carrying all the credibility. So he was a prophet again from Edom. He was connected to Abraham. He had the gift of prophecy. And he was very well known, believe it or not, as a legitimate man of God. This is why I believe, and I always tie this portion of Balak with Deuteronomy 13. Why? Because Deuteronomy 13 gives us the stipulation of what a real prophet is, according to the word of Hashem. See? It's a beautiful marriage. This whole chapter with Deuteronomy 13, interchangeably, they speak so much. So Numbers 24:16 says, the oracle of him who hears the words of God and knows the knowledge of the Most High, who sees the vision of the Almighty falling down, yet having his eyes uncovered. I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come from Jacob. A scepter shall rise from Israel, and shall crush through the forehead of Moab and tear down all the sons of Seth, it says. Continuing on in here in 18, Edom shall be a possession. Seir, its enemies, also will be a possession, while Israel performs valiantly. One from Jacob shall have dominion and will destroy the remnant from the city. And, of course, in Jewish literature, this text right here is a messianic text. It is prophesying of a future coming of Mashiach. But it details exactly what Mashiach is supposed to do at the same time. As a matter of fact, Dead Sea Scrolls, which is probably one of the most ancient scrolls that we can find today in our modern living, and the Damascus document literally states concerning this person right here in Jacob. And it says that the star is the interpreter of the law, essentially, who comes to Damascus, as it is written, a star has left Jacob, and a staff has risen from Israel. Now, I want to go here real quickly. Bear with me for a second. So, in verse 17, which is talking about a star has issued from Yaakov and a scepter bearer has risen from Israel, right? It says in here, Velo Garov Darach Kochav Mi Yaakov. So it's talking about a star. When it says that a star shall come forth from Yaakov, the Hebrew word there that it's actually stating, this is very interesting. Please pay attention. This is very interesting. It is the word for derech in Hebrew. And what is derech for those who speak Hebrew in here? Because it actually says darach, but it's the same shoresh, derech. And what is interesting is that the Damascus document states that the star from Yaakov is the interpreter of the law, which actually validates what the Hebrew text says. How is it that the star from Yaakov is going to destroy the Midianite nation, the Moabite nation, and essentially all the enemies of Israel? How is it that he is going to accomplish this? Interesting enough, because of the word derech, which means the way, the path, it is often associated with the Torah. essentially. The Torah is the way, the derech, essentially. So, by the means of the Torah, the derech, this anointed, or it's not even say anointed one in here, this star, essentially, is going to destroy. In other words, the purpose of the interpreter of the law is that he is going to inactivate the laws, and through the law, he'll be able to get rid of the enemies. It's really, really amazing, because he's not going to go out there with an M16 and start shooting all the enemies of Israel. But rather, he himself is going to enact laws that will provide the infrastructure for Israel to destroy the enemies. Let me give you an example. Today is the opposite of what's happening. Today in Israel, we are actually safe harboring our enemies. According to Torah law, we should really get rid of all these enemies, in theory. But the government today, what is it doing? It's not enacting these laws. And because we're not enacting these laws, what's happening in part, of course, we got the great United Nations. They're such friends of Israel, you know. What would we do without them, right? But because of that right there, this is the reason why we have so many enemies that surround us, when you really think about this. What the star is going to do is, because he's going to interpret the law, he's going to enact laws, and through those laws, the armies of Israel would now be able to do what? Destroy the enemies. This is so really, really amazing. Because that's going to be the purpose. You know, when it says that Moshe built the tabernacle, Moshe never even picked up a hammer. But the people that were surrounding him were the ones that actually built it, but it was under his regimen. So it's going to see the same thing with the Star of Yaakov. The Star of Yaakov, all he's going to do, he's going to be the legal entity that will make way for Israel to defend itself, essentially. And how is that going to be? It's going to come through the beautiful Torah. The actual really Torah that comes from Hashem, then this is what actually is going to bring essentially an end to the enemies of Israel. So this brings us to our Torah reading this week. In 25:1, it says, while Israel remained at Shittim, the people began to play the harlot with the daughters of Moab. There's a great lesson in here. And I remember where we're heading with this teaching so far. You have a prophet, by the way, we skip a lot because it's just a lot in here to cover in the little time that we have. But we have a prophet that in every instant is trying to curse Yisra'eel. So let me just give you a quick synopsis, and then we'll dig into this. Unfortunately, all his tactics fail. He cannot curse Israel no matter what he does. But one thing he is doing, he's milking the king for money. Because every time he has to meet with the king has to pay him. So this is very, very savvy, very, 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 again, very smart in his behalf, because all he wants to do is get money from the king. So it comes to the point that he tries to curse Israel, and at one point he even says, how can I curse what God has blessed? Right? Which it really is amazing, amazing encouragement for each and one of us here today. How can someone curse you if God has blessed you? The question still stands today. And this parasha actually gives us the answer. And the answer is Kulum. No one. No one can curse you. So if, some witch comes and starts saying, I'm going to throw a curse on you, just laugh at her face. But here's the caveat, though. It came to the point where Balaam was very, very smart, by the way. So he already knew that he cannot curse these people. So after he milked the king completely of all his money, now he's going to give him the real answer. You're a tactical salesman, right? I'm not going to give you the answer right off the bat. I'm going to wait, get money out of you, and then I'll give you the answer. That's what Balaam did. Balaam did. So he says, so here's the deal, king. I cannot curse these people. You cannot curse these people. But there's only one way that these people can become cursed, and that is through themselves. So, I have a master plan. And take a look at this. This is going to work tremendously, I promise you. Extra bonus if it works, by the way. Let's get all the Midianites women, and let's just dress them up really, really pretty. And let's make sure that we put them all in the forefront so when the men of Israel pass by, they can see him. And from that point on, we might be onto something. Right? How did that work? It can only work one way. And it's opening in Parsha, or in chapter 25:1. It says, while Israel remained in Shittim. Check this out. There's a message in here that's very, very powerful. In Hebrew, it says, Vayeshev Yisra'eel Bashittim. And what is so amazing about Vayeshev Yisra'eel Bashittim is that it's giving us something about the state of Israel at that very moment. Because when we talk about Vayeshev, what are we referring to? As a matter of fact, this kind of language is used in the Torah. For instance, we read about this language earlier in Genesis when it says that Israel dwelled where? In Egypt, right? When it says Genesis 47:27, it says, now Israel lived in the land of Egypt, in Goshen. What is Yoshev? As it turns out, folks, Yoshev means to settle, to dwell, right? Essentially. To spend a lot of time, essentially. So when it says that Israel, Vayeshev Yisra'eel Bashittim, it says that they settle a lot. They were spending a lot of time in what? Bashittim. But what is Shittim? Well, as it turns out, Shittim carries different kind of meanings, but prominent meaning for Shittim literally means, it's from Shita, which means acacia, like the acacia wood, Shittim. But it also dwells with a drift, essentially, like essentially roaming, drifting away. In other words, what the text is telling us, that Israel was unfortunately at that point settling too much in the areas of roaming away, essentially. And because they were doing this, and what I mean by roaming away, let me speak conventional language today, okay? They were starting to assimilate with the people of the land. They were starting to follow the customs. That's why it says, well, Yeshev, or by Yeshev. It's you're dwelling. You are with the people. Let's put it this way. You're migrating with the people, essentially. And because of this, unfortunately, because of this dwelling and wandering off, essentially, it gave the authority and the power for these women to be able to, unfortunately, seduce Israel. So what is the progression here? Because it says that Israel dwell in Shittim, right? I'm going to read exactly how the text says. It says that Israel dwell in Shittim and the people began to commit harlotry. I really would like to share this in the text because I think it's important. It's really, really, really important. It says, for they invited the people to the sacrifices of the God. I'm going to go to verse 2. They invited the people to the feast of their gods. The people ate and prostrated themselves to their gods. In Hebrew says, Vatikreach le'am. When it says that they invited the people to the feast of their gods, the word for invite is Vatikreach in Hebrew, which gives us the shoresh of that word is kara, which is the same title for Vayikra, which is the same book that expresses how to draw near to God. In other words, where do we read about the festivals of God? In the book of Vayikra. Why? Because in Leviticus 23 gives us this prescription. How do we come and draw near to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? So in here, it's just that they weren't invited, right? Because the text puts it very lightly, invited. No, it was more than invited. It was a means of drawing near. This is what's so amazing. Because it says that they invited the people to the sacrifices of their gods. Now remember that we started this with Israel already was dwelling in Shittim. So this was already in them. Their curiosity, wonder how is it that you guys worship your gods? Let me go check and see. So what happens is that the Midianite women are dressed very pretty. This is the council. We're going to read more about this later. And they just say, hey, I got an invitation for you to come to our festival. Naturally, if you are in that day as Bnei Yisra'eel, you're like, well, we only worship the one true God. The God of Abraham, Isaac, you know what I mean, and Yaakov. We don't worship any other gods. Not a problem. We're just inviting you to the festival. You don't have to worship the God. Just because we're inviting you doesn't mean that you're worshiping the God. The coolest thing. Hear that. Dirá. This is very, very important. Very, very important. Because more often than not, folks, how do I put this in such a polite way? It's like saying, okay, let me put it in a perspective that all of you can understand. So you're a married person, right? You're married. But you're just going to go on a date with somebody else. But nothing is going to happen. We're just going to go to McDonald's and have burgers, and that's it. And talk a little bit about work and whatnot. You know, it's a colleague of yours, by the way. Is there anything wrong with that, per se? Well, you may very well be going to McDonald's and, hey, we're going to officially just go out and talk a little bit about work and whatnot. But is it profitable? No. See, and this is the part that a lot of people don't get. It's that by putting yourself in such a position will lead to something worse. The fact that you're there may not necessarily be wrong, but the fact that it can lead to something worse. And history shows that it does. It is better not to do it. According to our Rishonim, at this point in time, Israel was in a very, very high state of elevated. What does that teach us? That even the most spiritual person who is such a lofty spiritual level can fall for something like this. No one is exempt, in other words. And we should be very careful, especially when it comes to celebrations that are not necessarily kosher, if you know what I mean. Every year they come around, folks. Every year. And we have to be very careful. So what happens is that the invitation, notice what the text says, by being invited, the invitation led to what? To the bowing down. I'm not stating it. The text says it. This is literally in the same verse. In the same verse it says, Vayishtachavu le'eloheihen, it says. Vayishtachavu. What is Vayishtachavu? Literally, it's translated as bowing down, but the reality is, shucha literally can mean also to pay homage or respect for someone. So out of respect, it led to idolatry is what I'm saying. Because it's kind of rude, you know what I mean? If you're coming to someone's party and you don't honor the reason why they're gathering there, you kind of be like an oddball. So again, don't let this confuse you. Well, it's just an invitation. No, it's an invitation that puts you in a bad position. In a position now that you have to somewhat honor, because if you don't, then it's counterintuitive. Why are you there? All you're going to do is create strife then. And you're going to possibly offend someone at that. So this led to, unfortunately, because they came in, they got invited, this is the aspect, this is where Balaam knew that Israel can become cursed. And I will submit to you that what we read in here, it is something that has been happening for out in and out to our generation, to our people in general. Something very similar we find in 2 Kings 17:33-35. It says in here, they fear the Lord and serve their own gods according to the customs of the nations. Listen, please don't take my word for this. Go to 2 Kings and read the chapter, chapter 17. Read all chapter 17. It's going to mamash blow your mind. It's so true. They says that they worship God Listen to the language. They didn't say they denied God for an idol. Heavens forbid. We never will read that in the Tanakh. Never ever Israel never ever said we're done with the God of our fathers and we're going to worship an idol. That was never a problem. The problem is that they always worshiped, they feared God, but they did it with the customs of the nations. In other words, we're going to God. We understand that you gave us laws and that you gave us a path and you gave us ways that we're supposed to approach you. You gave us festivals. I mean, good night. The Jewish festivals are at least a minimum 7 a year. That's a minimum. That's not including all the other chagims and everything else. Forget about all that. We want to maybe do that, but we also wanted to incorporate some other aspects of foreign worship to honor you. Doesn't work, folks. Again, let me make another example so that I can speak conventional language here today. Let's go back to the marriage thing. That's like me telling my wife right now, honey, I love you to death, love your customs and your birthday, but I really, really want to do it in the day of my ex-wife or my ex-girlfriend. And by the way, she had a custom that she liked to do it this way. I would like to do it like that with you. How will you feel about that, family? Sorry that I had to use such graphic ways, but in reality, it's the only way that I can you can understand this. When Hashem says, this is the way you are to approach me, it's because he is stating to you how he, as your God, right, as your Redeemer, how he wants to be honored. So you don't get to honor a person the way you want to honor a person. Right? That's like me telling you, I want to honor you, but I want to honor you my way. How about if I honor you the way you like it? Isn't that more honorable, essentially? And that's really what's happening in here. So they're doing this. They're fearing God, so they're still holding on to God. They're saying that God is God, but unfortunately, they're mixing their worship with the customs of the nations. It says it in here, to the custom of the nation from among whom they have been exiled and carried. So depending, if you were in Assyria, Jews that were scattered to Assyria were keeping a different custom. Jews that were scattered to Babylon were keeping another custom. So it depends where they were at. It says in 34, to this day they do according to their earlier customs. They do not fear the Lord, nor do they allow their statutes or their ordinances, or follow their statutes and their ordinances or law, or the commandments which the Lord commanded the sons of Jacob, which he named Israel, with whom the Lord made a covenant and commanded them, saying, you shall not fear other gods, nor bow yourself to them, nor serve them, nor sacrifice to them. Unfortunately, this wasn't the case. So what we see in here is that the accounts of Balaam, folks, we can see how it was so successful throughout the history of Bnei Israel. As they went to different nations, as they were scattered to different nations, unfortunately, they picked up on the customs of those nations and incorporated that into their worship. The very thing that Balaam wanted them to do what? To curse them. That's really, really unfortunately what we're looking at it. So, what was the outcome of the assimilation that took place? Numbers 25:3 says, so Israel, notice the progression. I'm inviting you. Well, first of all, pretty women, invite. The invite leads to the bowing down. The bowing down now goes to verse 3. Again, I'm not making this up. It's just all right there for you. It's laid out for you. Just read it. Read it. Really read it and look at the progression. So it's a progression. Now it says, so Israel joined themselves to Baal Peor. Now, and the Lord was very angry against Israel. It says, Vait Samet Israel Legaal Peor, or Lebaal Peor. And that's what's so intriguingly amazing. Vait Samet in Hebrew it says, Israel. It's from the Hebrew word samat. And what is samat? Literally, samat means to be glued to be paired. Like in animals, when you pair them together, that's kind of like the concept of samat. It literally says that Israel cling itself was coupled together with Baal Peor. How does that happen? It starts with a simple invite. A simple invite. And next thing you know, everything now they joined themselves with Baal Peor. And now what happens is, actually Balaam was successful. The council of Balaam actually became very, it failed horribly initially. But the final draw was right there. How do we get them to curse themselves? Get them to worship, get them to mix, not forsake. Because Balaam knew that Israel would never forsake their God. But rather get them to mix their worship. Because at least they're still holding on to the God. You see what I mean? That's easier to entice than to telling them forsake God altogether. No, let's just get them to mix their worship. And if they mix their worship, we get them to curse them. So I want to conclude in here with the actual counsel. And Josephus actually shares a lot in this. Josephus says, do you therefore set out the comeliness of such of your daughters as are most eminent for beauty, and proper to force and conquer the modesty of those that behold them, and these decked and trimmed to the highest degree you are able. This is, Josephus is expounding on the counsel of Balaam. Then you shall send them to be near the Israelite camp, and give them in charge that when the young men of the Hebrews desire their company, they allow it them. And when they see that they are enamored of them, let them take their leave. And if they entreat them to say, let them not give their consent till they have persuaded them to leave off their obedience to their own laws and the worship of that God who established them, and to worship the gods of the Midianites and the Moabites. For by this means God will be angry at them. Accordingly, then Balaam had suggested counsel to them, and he went his way. So what was the whole aspect? The woman would not give in until they declare that they will forsake everything, all their laws and everything. Not necessarily God, but just all the customs, all their laws. And upon doing that, then they will consent at that point. And then what happens is, after that, is Pinchas rises up. Now, next week, we're going to finalize here today, but next week, we're going to talk a little bit about Pinchas, because this parasha ends with Pinchas and what Pinchas did, essentially. Moshe gave the order for these men to be destroyed. Moshe is not just the head of the Sanhedrin court, but he has a whole head of people that are with him. Remember, there were 70 elders with him. And what happens is something very, very amazing. No one does anything. Moshe gave the order, and all you can hear is crickets. Nothing. As a matter of fact, a man, it says in here, for the children of Israel, literally took a woman in front of Moses and in front of the assembly as a sign of disrespect and took her into his tent. No one did anything. So what happens is Pinchas rose. Now, many have used Pinchas as a means of a vigilante spirit, but I will submit to you this is completely opposite what the text is saying, by the way. The only reason why Pinchas acted is because Moses gave the order. If Moses would have not given the order, Pinchas would have not acted. But Pinchas acted because no one did. Even though an order was given by an authority, they all knew it was recognized by God. So at this point, someone rose when no one else would, upon the order of Rabbeinu Moshe. And I feel that sometimes we have to do the same, folks. And again, in a proper way. Not in a vigilante way, but in a proper way. Stand for what is truth. Speak what is truth. And in this case, because of what he did, next week we'll see really what was the outcome for Pinchas. As next week's parasha is actually named by his name, Pinchas. So Hashem bless you and keep you. I hope this was a blessing for all of you. And we look forward to finishing up in this book of Numbers and going into Deuteronomy and finishing up the year. And hope to see every single one of you in the growth and what we're going through and the seasons that we're going through. And may Hashem continue to bless each and one of you. For those watching online, thank you for watching online. Hashem bless you and keep you.